Here in Lisbon for the United Nations Oceans Conference, and I'm honored to be here with Palau's ambassador and permanent representative to the United Nations, Ilana Seid, to talk about what it means for Palau and the broader Pacific to be at this conference. So, Ambassador, thank you very much for being here to talk to us, and maybe you can just start off high level. This conference, what does Palau's involvement look like? Why are you in Lisbon? What do you want to achieve here?
So we're coming straight off of the 7th Our Ocean Conference, which we just hosted in Palau in April. So that was the first ocean conference to ever be held in a SIDS country. SIDS is Small Island Developing States, for those who are not familiar with the lingo. And we thought it was really important because we talk a lot about oceans issues, but a lot of people don't really understand what oceans issues are for small islands. So the problems we're facing with climate change, whether that's sea level rise or ocean acidification, coral bleaching, or tuna is leaving our EEZ because the water is getting too hot because of the carbon sequestration that the ocean does. So having that kind of dialogue be built into the international community is very important. So this ocean conference, we're taking some of the momentum that we had in Palau and bringing it here and trying to push that message forward, but also trying to incorporate the ocean's agenda into the ocean climate nexus. So how do we take a lot of this information and then feed it into the UNFCCC COP27 that's happening in November? How do we incorporate things like blue carbon into Article 6, for example? How do we increase climate finance to small island developing states so they can build resilience around climate change? So just kind of at a high level, that's where the trajectory has been and is going, and that's the bulk of our work here.
Okay, so lots happening, and obviously you recently had the Our Oceans Conference in Palau. So Palau is really coming as a leader when it comes to the ocean spaces. But how do you see, I guess, the Pacific, the representation for the wider Pacific at this type of event? We know that these last 2 years have been challenging. Many Pacific islands only recently opened their borders and have not necessarily been as well represented, and also it's a long way to get here, so you don't necessarily have the civil society representation that perhaps European countries do. So do you see a strong Pacific voice at these events, or maybe more broadly for the SIDS countries?
Yeah, the Pacific voice is definitely strong at this one. We have 3 heads of state here, which is, even though we would like more representation, it's still fairly big for a conference of this magnitude. It is very far. Some of our team members traveled 4 days to get here from Palau, and it's very expensive. And so for developing countries like ours, we have to measure the trade-offs and the benefits. And but the Pacific is, we call it the blue ocean continent, and so for oceans is definitely key to our livelihoods. It's key to our identities. It's key to our economies. Most of us rely on blue tourism, fisheries, things of that nature to run our economy. So Pacific has definitely been a very strong voice at this conference. The small island developing states, they were, I think, kind of regarded as the people who push forward the 1.5 degree climate heating target at the Paris COP. So those voices are important because we're really at the forefront of climate change, and without them in these international venues, it's like you're getting less than half the story. So.
And there's obviously been a big push for small island developing states to be referred to as large ocean states. Given the importance, it would be impossible to have an oceans conference without the Pacific being here and represented. So a lot of the discussions here have been on the blue economy, and I think, in my experience, the blue economy can mean a lot of different things to different people, but there's this connection between the people and the ocean and what that means. So in Palau's context, what does the blue economy mean in practice?
So the blue economy is a big term because it really, when everything that touches the ocean that generates money for the people is considered blue economy. So Palau's major industry is tourism. Most people come to Palau for scuba diving because it is one of the most biodiverse marine environments in the world. So that generates a lot of our GDP, basically a lot of our government revenues. We also have commercial fishing. So that's also considered blue economy. But among the larger scheme of things, blue energy, like offshore wind, that's also considered blue economy. So anything that touches the ocean that generates money is blue economy in our books. Yeah. But yeah, for Palau, it's mostly tourism and commercial fishing. We are working on sustainable aquaculture. It's still very much in the infancy stages, but how do you sustainably use the ocean is kind of what we're trying to get at. We found that when we focus too much on tourism, then there's a lot of impact on the reef because there's so many tourists and they're trampling on the coral, and that's not a sustainable method. So, how do you blend that portfolio into having a sustainable model that relies on various parts of the ocean?
So last question, I guess, looking to the future, what's next coming out of this conference? What are the big dates on your agenda for the next year or two, and both in these international discussions, but also for Palau?
So big dates. Let's see. I think we're
Or big
coming up-
announcements,
yeah.
big things happening.
No, I think UNGA is a key date that's coming up. The highlight in September at the UN. And then following that is COP27, which is the big climate change conference under the UNFCCC. So they're the two key dates for this year. And then part of the work I'm trying to do is really focus on climate finance for SIDS countries. So I'm exploring things like, is there ways to utilize blue carbon to do some of the marine protection that we're trying to do in Palau. So that doesn't really fall on the calendar, but it's kind of on my agenda for the next year.
Okay. Thank you so much for taking the time to share a bit about Palau and your conference experience. Really appreciate it. I know it's been a busy week, and all the best for the rest of your time in Lisbon.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.